This is Call the Psychiatrist. I'm Dr. David Handley.
And I'm Dr. Abby Snavely.
On this episode, a listener's therapist hid behind a magazine after they saw each other in public. Yazmin wonders if therapy could be helpful for the grief she's experiencing a year after her husband died. And a listener gave a thank you card to their therapist, but he didn't acknowledge it, which has created distance in the relationship.
Say you like me, you better count the ways. Side to side.
Listening to this podcast does not mean we have a doctor-patient relationship. Our intention is to educate and entertain. Nothing we say is intended or recommended as a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own physician or other qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical questions or conditions. Our first question comes from someone we're calling Rachel.
I've been seeing my new therapist for 2 months. My other therapist moved away. I think I saw her at a store. As I was walking out through a double set of doors, she was in front of me. She stopped, bent down, grabbed a free magazine, and kept walking. Someone stopped her, a friend, and told her she was surprised to see her in the middle of the day. Did she take the day off? I kept walking with my cart and went straight to my car, not looking back. I heard her say that yes, she was taking some time off. The thing is, my therapist is on a 2-week vacation. I got in my car to leave, and as I look up to drive off, this person, who I think is my therapist, is walking to her car with the magazine held up against the side of her face like she is hiding from someone. So now I feel if it was her, then I am wondering if I am such a horrible person she doesn't even want to see me outside of session. How can I go back? I would never engage in conversation with her unless she approached me first. Maybe a quick wave and a hello. So how do I go back? How do I not feel that there is something wrong with me as a person? I am a very shy, quiet person. This incident has caused my depression and anxiety to worsen. Thank you. I love your show, and I can tell you really care about your patients. Please don't use my real name on the show.
I've never heard of this technique in therapy. I've definitely seen it on a TV sitcom.
Yeah, like you're in some sort of bad slapstick comedy.
Yeah,
like,
what is this therapist doing?
Like Homer going in the bushes or something? I don't know. She's acting ridiculous. I think. I don't know. I think we have to believe, A, by how this was written, and then also just for the sake of the discussion, we have to believe that this was a therapist, right? There's no way.
Oh, yeah. Even the part she overheard was consistent with, yeah. No, it's the therapist.
It's 100% the therapist.
Yeah.
And I could see, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, Rachel, bottom line, this has nothing to do with you personally. I'm sorry this happened, and I'm sorry your therapist was so unprepared for this. The drama was not necessary.
Exactly. It seems like the therapist didn't know what to do, which is wild to me, right?
Right. Professional people have to deal with this all the time, and especially psychotherapists.
I guess maybe it's helpful to say how we would approach it. My training and my belief is that my patient's relationship to me is their business and it's private. I am never going to approach someone or acknowledge them, at least in the public way. If I run into someone in public, it's going to be up to the patient to come up to me or to say hi if they want to. Occasionally, if I have someone who lives in the same neighborhood as me, or we run in the same circles, or I have some reason to believe that it's highly likely that we'll run into each other, I don't want to make them paranoid, but I just kind of say, just so you know, if we were to see each other in public, this is how I would approach it, because I don't want anyone to feel bad like Rachel did or feel like I was snubbing them in some way. But that would just be me giving a very discreet acknowledgement to them, not hiding behind a barricade.
I mean, I think the reason we have these rules about engagement outside is to protect our patients, or in this case, a client. She didn't want her to feel uncomfortable or maybe even distressed at them seeing each other outside of the therapeutic encounter. And then there's always the question of privacy. The way she handled it was that's just not how you handle it. But again, the theme here is that I think she was actually trying to protect Rachel. She just did it in a really terrible way or silly way. Right.
Which really means that regardless of what the therapist was thinking, it's not that Rachel's a horrible person.
Yeah, right. Your therapist has probably seen you in your most vulnerable moments. You've probably told them things you've never told anyone else. And for that to work, you have that well-defined frame that we've talked about, specified place, specified amount of time, all the specific boundaries. And when you encounter somebody outside the frame, it can either put somebody in a vulnerable mindset at a time they weren't expecting to feel that way, and can lead people to feel pretty overwhelmed. So I think it catches people off guard. And then the privacy thing is just really hard to predict. I live and work in a small town, so I encounter this all the time. I think a big example, though, to illustrate the point is I was walking on the street. I passed a group of 4 people. 2 of those 4 were my patients, but they didn't know.
No.
They didn't know they each saw me. A third person knew me personally and knew what I did for a living. And so thankfully I followed my protocol, which was,
I'm sorry, who's in a sitcom? Because that's quite a setup, my friend. But anyway,
thankfully I didn't acknowledge, but then one of the people acknowledged me, and then that it all got out in the open. But again, it's where privacy was undermined.
Right.
It was just the circumstances. For that group, it ended up being okay. But
so one of them said hi and you said hi back, or what happened?
I just said hi back.
Okay.
But then they were like, oh, I know him. How do you know him? It was that whole conversation apparently unfolded. But you never know who a person is with. Like they might be with a spouse or and they may not want to have a conversation about who you are and more about that relationship. So yeah, it's just the rule, like you've already said, is just I'm happy to talk to somebody, but I'm just not going to initiate it.
I mean, the most I'll do is make eye contact and smile, right?
Yeah.
But wow, yeah, that's. So you overheard them? Sorry, I'm still like, what happened? So you overheard them talking to each other about?
Oh no, it all came back in the room because then I had to have subsequent sessions.
You've seen them say, yeah.
So.
Okay. Did anybody get upset?
No, thankfully, thankfully that one was okay. But there's so many scenarios where that wouldn't have been okay.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. I mean, I know I've talked about a couple times running into people or them running into me. I think there are times sometimes where I am more aware maybe than the patient is. I mean, I remember once being at a pool and feeling very self-conscious, but I don't think the patient ever saw me. And then I'm not going to bring it up later and kind of say, oh, that was weird when we were at the pool all day together, because then I feel like, I don't know, then I could see that leading somebody to feel like they're being surveilled or sort of paranoid or something, like I could be anywhere. I don't know. I think things like that, or sometimes I'll walk into a restaurant with my husband and he'll be like, oh, let's take the table by the window. And I'm like, nope, not that table. Let's go sit right by the bathroom. And it's not because I don't want to be near my patient, but if I'm going to sit through a meal, I think everybody is going to feel uncomfortable, and it's not going to feel very private if we're within earshot of each other or something like that, if it can be avoided. So I know that's like a little bit different, but I don't know. But this stuff happens all the time, and it just kind of cracks me up that this woman was so unprepared for being spotted at the grocery store. It's like everybody gets groceries. Like that's probably one of the biggest cross sections.
It doesn't make me that. There are some scenarios or situations where I could be uncomfortable. I really am just concerned about making other people uncomfortable out of context. But I try really hard to remember to talk to people about this after our first session. And the other thing is, unlike you, I am so oblivious when I'm out and about. So there's a good chance that people will see me and I won't see them. And then they may think that I'm ignoring them when in fact I just am so in my head that I just don't.
You're just all business. All business all the time.
That's right.
Gotta get it. Get in, get out, get it done.
That's right. Well, I think back to Rachel, your therapist should have acknowledged your existence.
Right.
If you waved hello, and it would have been fine. And I hope you go back. I was
going to say, how do you go back? I think you go back, feeling like knowing with certainty that you didn't do anything wrong. It sounds like Rachel's worried that the therapist would think she was going to talk to her too much or something like that. No, there's nothing wrong with you. And I think probably it's worth having a conversation with her about the next time it might happen. And then hopefully it's an avenue to open up some of these self-worth, anxiety, and depression things that you hinted at, that this woman mishandling it really impacted you in a negative way. And I'm not like every cloud has a silver lining kind of person, but maybe it is a way to talk about some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I will say, no one has ever been inappropriate in as far as trying to
No,
engage me. Like no one. I've never had that problem.
absolutely not.
Yeah,
And it's
like
happened a
some of
lot, right? We've been doing this a while.
well, I feel like some of our primary care colleagues, people will start showing them rashes at the grocery store or start having questions about refills and things. That's just never happened for me. So I've never had the need to hide behind a magazine.
Are very into keeping their mental health stuff private, right? Once I ran into somebody at the grocery store and he was excited to introduce me to his wife. He's just like, "Oh wow, I talk about each of you all the time to each other. You should probably say hi to each other." And so we did, and then we parted ways. But it's not because he was like, "Oh, you need to tell my wife about this thing or something," right? Like it was just an introduction is the most engagement I've ever gotten.
Yeah, tell her that I'm right.
Yeah, I mean, I would do that. Sure, of course. I could see the temptation, but he's just like, I don't know, something like, these are the two most important women in my life. You guys should meet each other. I'm like, okay.
A little
and
awkward,
I think
but
she
okay.
was,
yeah.
I think she was equally thought he was a little cringy. And so that made me like her more. Everything went fine.
All right, Rachel, I hope you go back.
Yeah, please do. And sorry, I know it's hard. It's a hard transition. It's bad timing with her, with just switching to a new therapist too.
Yeah. This review comes from L. Janowski. Wish I discovered this podcast long ago. Dave and Abby are so helpful. They have a terrific dynamic together and make situations easy to understand. This is the kind of podcast that when you start listening to it, you wish you had discovered it long ago. One suggestion, would love to hear you review Freud's Last Session. Would be fun to hear your take. Well, thanks for the review and thanks for that idea. I think it's actually a great idea.
Yeah.
So for those listeners out there, this is a movie. It's supposed to be released at the end of this year, 2023, and then with a wide release in January. So I think we should definitely do it.
Absolutely.
When I got this question, it prompted me to start rereading the book that the movie and then also the play are based on. So I'm excited about it. But here was a request I had that if any of you listeners think you'll see the movie and you'd like to discuss it with other people, please email us. I would love for us to try to do a group discussion or something like a movie club. I don't know. It'd be
really
nice
cool.
it'd be nice to talk to some folks out there. So if you're interested in that, just send me a quick note at callthepsychiatrist@gmail.com. This question comes from Yazmin, or Yazmin. I've been struggling with persistent sadness since my husband passed away a year ago. I find myself crying every day and night, yearning for his physical presence beside me. It's painful to accept that he's no longer here with me, and I often wish he could be. I felt he left this world prematurely, and I'm left with a sense of longing for the time we should have had together. It's especially challenging because I believed we had more time ahead of us, given that he was only 66 when he passed away. Each morning it's a struggle to find the motivation to get out of bed and face the day. I'm wondering if therapy might be able to help me through this difficult period. I'm not sure how to differentiate between the grieving process and depression, and I'm uncertain about how long it should take to heal from this loss. How do you, as a therapist, help someone with grief? What can I expect? Do I need to find a therapist who specializes in grief? How many sessions does it take?
Where do you want to start?
I think first thing is that there's just no time limit to grieving.
Yeah, there's no shoulds in here, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
there's nothing universal.
No.
I mean, there's so many factors. I mean, not just the relationship, but people's culture and social norms and religious beliefs.
It's just not always a straightforward answer, or maybe ever a straightforward answer.
Yeah, these scenarios often make me wonder about somebody's support system and if the people in their life are kind of ready for the bereaved to move on and they start to push them a little too hard to get back into certain aspects of their life.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And so maybe the idea of talking to someone else, an impartial third party or whatever, might give Yazmin the space that she needs to continue grieving if your hunch is right and the other people in her life are hoping that she moves on with it.
Yeah. And I mean, clearly she thinks that something should be different now.
Right.
I think at least, if she's in the United States, there is something about the year, there's the year of the anniversaries of all the things that come up. And then, it's like this expectation.
All the firsts, absolutely. Like every, the first Christmas or anniversary or
birthdays,
whatever milestone, each of those can be really hard.
Yeah.
If she's coming up on the anniversary of his death, or sometimes a diagnosis or other milestones, even in the process of losing him, that could make things worse.
Yeah. So it sounds like just a lot of expectations that it's supposed to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Freud had the same question that Yazmin does, which is, at what point has this now crossed over into something else that I might not call grief anymore? Like when it's become so internalized and so disruptive and so disabling. And I think that is the boundary that we're looking at when we think about treatment. I think with any disorder,
loss of function, right?
Yeah, with any experience, it's like, anxiety is also normal,
and sometimes healthy.
Yeah, and sometimes healthy until it's disabling or affecting your ability to work and be in relationships. And that, I think, getting extra support around that makes sense.
And the only thing she mentions here is having a hard time getting out of bed, right? But the rest of the question doesn't really lean that way.
Yeah, well, we definitely don't have enough information. I mean, there's yearning and there's longing, and those things make me think more of prolonged grief disorder. But I think ultimately her question is this gone too long? I hope people in mental health should be cautious about pathologizing grief, because it is a part of life. And it is normal. Most people don't seek mental health treatment for grief.
No.
But there is a group of people where this process has become so internalized that they can't seem to move forward. And I think there is a role for getting some additional help. And I think therapy is about grieving. I mean, we grieve loss of roles, and we grieve relationships, and it's often facilitating a process of grief. She asked, would therapy be helpful? I don't see that it would be unhelpful. I mean, I don't see it would have a downside.
Yeah, if she's asking this question, I obviously sense some apprehension, but if she's asking the question, I don't think that it would hurt at all. A specific grief therapist might be the right way to go about it. But like you said, any therapist worth their salt is going to be able to deal with grief. But there may be things that Yazmin's not aware of, and that we're certainly not aware of in the writing that make this harder, that could help her move forward or get a little bit more peace, at the risk of sounding cheesy.
We don't know enough about the way she's thinking about this, but I think we can talk about prolonged grief disorder. That's our latest label, our latest like year and a half old now.
Hot off the press.
And I guess maybe the point I want to make is that I think sometimes after a year or so, when the loss is felt almost with the same intensity as when the person first died, the pain is almost as intense. People go out of their way to avoid remembering the loved one. They have a hard time thinking about their future. They haven't really made any steps back into their old lives, like seeing friends or doing things that they used to. And that's not to say for things to be like they once were, because things will never be like they once were, but at least some steps into reintegrating into the life that you had before. There's a longing that can become consuming. The preoccupation is pretty intense and then becomes, I think, in many ways disabling. I mean, it's
very limiting, right?
It's very limiting. Yeah. And so if there's something about that describes a person's situation, then I think all the more reason to get some outside support.
Makes sense to me.
If you're interested in knowing more about that, Columbia University has a really good website for patients, and I'll put a link to that in the episode notes.
Nice. Looking at the question here, Yazmin wants to know, how many sessions does it take? I mean, I don't know. And that's in kind of the same way of saying there aren't shoulds here, that I think it takes as long as it takes, and it may, the resolution of the grief or never missing him. Not that I think Yazmin would want that. That's probably not a realistic or desirable goal. But it may be that she's able to just get a little bit of understanding and move through it relatively quickly. Or, if it's a therapist that she clicks with, it may go from, which I know these go hand in hand, but it may go from this grief or this bereavement part to rebuilding her life afterwards. Sometimes people are, surprised by where therapy can take them. And some of that's about what Yazmin wants out of it. And I guess just how entrenched some of these experiences of the grief are, assuming that there are some that have become problematic.
Yeah, there's just no way to predict it. No. But I don't think there's any harm in giving it a try. You may also think about grief support groups. Some people hate them, some people love them, but I don't know that you can judge it without experiencing it. So that may be something else to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think dealing with this alone or in the same ways that you have been is probably, I guess it sounds like she's decided that she needs to mix that up a little bit. And so whether that's with a therapist or in a group with other people, I think those are all good ways to give yourself a chance to experiencing something new or something with a little bit more momentum.
Yeah, and something else that may come from the group is some ideas about how to, or ways to ask for help, but also the kind of help that may be beneficial from your friends and family and the supports.
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea. Mm-hmm.
I think, like I say, as time goes by, it's this assumption of, I had somebody tell me, it's like, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like the good moments and the bad moments cancel each other out at the end of the day. There's still really, really hard moments a year later, 2 years later, forever. So I don't know. And I think it becomes, as more time passes, it's harder and harder to ask for that help from the people that love you.
Well said.
Well, we wish you all the best. And
yeah, I feel for you.
Yeah. Let us know if there's anything else we can try to answer.
Yeah. Take care.
Dancing just you and me.
And this question comes from an anonymous listener.
I wrote my therapist a card a few weeks ago to let him know how grateful I was for the role he plays in my life. He's helped me overcome my desire to self-harm. I felt it was important to convey just how significant his support has been to me. What surprised me was that he never said anything about my card or the sentiment I was trying to convey. Not one word. It was as if everything I wrote disappeared into thin air. Taking my cue from him, I didn't mention it either, although admittedly I was hurt. It was difficult for me to put my feelings about him and our relationship into writing. Our sessions have continued, but I feel more distant. I'd like to get that feeling of closeness again, but I can't help but feel like I did something wrong. My question is, what is the best way to say thank you? I've read numerous times that giving gifts can be seen as inappropriate, and I want to respect those boundaries. Nevertheless, I genuinely want to express my thanks. How can we, as clients, acknowledge the vital role therapists play in our lives in a way that's respectful and meaningful?
Well, first of all,
I think you already did.
Yeah, right. You did a great job. You did nothing wrong.
Absolutely not. This is question number 2 of the day of the patient blaming themselves for some just straight up weirdness on the therapist's behalf.
Yeah, you and Rachel need to get together.
Correct.
Well, so just on the last episode, I know this question, we got this question before the last episode came out, but we just got finished talking about, how nice it is to get notes from patients, and we treat them like gifts, and then we love to talk about them, or at least acknowledge them.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's great.
Yeah, right. And here it is. They tried it, and it's only created distance.
I mean, come on, folks. Mr. Therapist, bring it up. It's okay. I mean, I think, how do you say thank you? You can say thank you. I think writing a card is great. Putting them in writing is great. I think it does put a little bit more meaning into the gratitude. I don't know.
It's a shame that you're going to have to bring it up, but if you don't, you're going to be stuck with this feeling of distance, and that's not good for your treatment.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah. And I hate it that it's this way, but there is maybe a lesson in here for you. I'm not trying to silver lining this, but it could be good for you to speak up when your feelings are hurt. There might be a bigger lesson in your life there. This might be a moment for empowerment, but it also means that you're not blaming yourself because you have hurt feelings.
Absolutely.
So there's your therapeutic part of this is don't blame yourself.
And bring it up, right?
And bring it up.
And when somebody else messes up, you don't have to carry all the feelings about that.
Right. And it's okay to tell people when they hurt your feelings. And I hope the therapist, presumably he would be embarrassed that he didn't talk about it, and you guys can repair this.
Yeah. I think hopefully it is relatively straightforward. An extra bonus, like Dave said, would be getting something out of it. But I guess, but I do have questions, right? Like if the patient handed it to the therapist and then he never acknowledged it, I do think that's a little bit different. Maybe therapist is still being weird. than like receiving it in the mail, for example, because I'm like, this was behavior outside of the therapy. But you know what? That just means it needs to be talked about even more.
Right.
Like it's not, I can see
Okay,
maybe
so
how it's treated differently. But anyway, I'm working harder than that guy is, and I shouldn't have to. But go ahead.
Oh, so I didn't think about the mail. The mail does get lost these days. Okay.
It might get lost, but I'm just saying, but even something that sort of arrived outside of the session on a different day, on a different one, whatever, which I mean, still means it doesn't excuse it from being talked about. But I do think that there is something about, I don't know that the means of it is different. But I think it could, if I was the question asker, I would be more hurt if I had handed him the card myself.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But again, this is a lot of gymnastics when she just needs, or I don't know if it's a she, but when the patient needs to be like, yo, I wrote you a really nice card and you ignored it. What's up with that?
So my thought was that he's embarrassed or there's something uncomfortable about the level of gratitude or connection or something. I think there's something that's overwhelmed him. That is not this person's fault.
That is his problem.
That is his problem. That's what I just want to make that clear. But so maybe something for him to work on once they've acknowledged this.
This is not like an immediate gratification type of profession, and so like if it comes, he needs to get comfortable because it's not going to happen all that often. Like he needs to be able to savor it. That's all I'm saying.
This has nothing to do with therapy, but my grandmother painstakingly made a quilt for her doctor, just her primary doctor. I don't even know if it was a special occasion. It was an expression of thanks. It was one of the most intricate quilts I think she had ever done. It was all hand pieced and hand sewn, much nicer fabrics than she would usually use. And he responded like she'd given him a tomato. Right?
You're kidding. But how many hours did you put into that?
I know.
Hundreds, right?
Her feelings were so hurt. And so I think of her whenever a patient gives me anything. I'm like, I don't care what it is.
Big deal.
There's labor behind it and it deserves to be acknowledged. I'm saying everything has labor. There's emotional labor to writing that card.
No, 100%, right? Yeah. Like money, whatever. But yes, your grandmother, oh man.
Yeah.
Really? And do you think he also was overwhelmed, or
no? He was just a jerk.
Okay, I mean, that's also possible. Okay, yeah. Well, he didn't deserve that quilt.
No, he didn't.
And she didn't take it back either because she was probably a nice lady.
She's a nice lady. That's right.
I'd say you don't deserve that, sir.
All right. Well, I hope this is helpful. Please let us know how it goes.
Just bring it up.
Yeah.
These people need our help sometimes. And by these people, I mean the therapists. And I need help for my patients too. I'd feel terrible if something was going unsaid.
Oh yeah. No, these questions actually just remind me of that I'm obviously making some errors too that I'm not aware of.
I know. That's what I mean.
My patients are calling a different podcast.
Exactly. I'm doing stupid things. Like, please just tell me because I would love an opportunity to clear it up.
Yeah. So that's the real theme is that, we are also ridiculous at times.
Everybody's ridiculous. Oh, please,
but all we're asking is please give us and your therapist a chance to make it right.
No regular listener of this podcast thinks that I believe I'm above ridiculousness. Like, of course not. But yes, you're right. That's a good reminder. And so we're all in it together and we all need to help each other. And if this is all about relationships and working out these things, then it actually is an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And we've said this before, but because it's so real, that is why we will disappoint each other.
100%. Right. And maybe the mail carrier just had a bad day that day. Nobody knows. What? It's going to be returned to sender in like 6 months or something. You never know.
Yeah.
And then great. And then the patient's going to have to like say all the thanks because he never got the card. And that's going to be a whole other lesson.
Yeah. That'd be a different question.
It is a different question. Okay. Let us know how it goes. There's so many mysteries. There's so many ways this could have gone.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. And a special thanks to Yazmin and our anonymous listeners who sent in questions. As always, we love getting your reviews, feedback, and questions. You can send us an email or leave an audio message at our website, callthepsychiatrist.com. You can also email us directly at callthepsychiatrist@gmail.com. You can join us on Instagram or Facebook at Call the Psychiatrist. But the most important thing we ask is for you to please tell a friend about the show so we can keep growing our audience. Take care.
Bye.